Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Breaking from 2022. So, this movie is to, of course, be based on true events or true story. And first off, I like to say that for every one of these true stories, you can't guarantee that 100% of it is true. Uh, but, based off of this movie, like, I hope most of it is. Just because of the tale of this character and the just like heartbreaking parts of it, and realizing that this was to be a person's life is to also make me, when critiquing it, uh, positive or negatively saying things about it, like, we all have to remember that this was a person, and like, I want to try to uh, kind of do my best to try to recount or go into a person's life for however long or however uh, lengthy this movie was. So, with that said, this movie immediately reminds me of John Q, the Denzel Washington movie. John Q, of course, was a Denzel Washington film where we had a man who is to possibly lose his son because he needed a heart transplant. And so Denzel Washington's character is desperately like scrambling money together, looking at his wife teary-eyed every single day as their son is struggling to live, and the build-up of all of that turns around and has finally John go into this hospital and hold the hospital up to demand that his son be on this donors list, or at some point in the film, they are to go on and find a donor to possibly give this heart to John Q's son. So, with that comparison, Breaking is a very heart aching kind of film. We have a character named Brian here who, when we further and further go into the film, it seems that there is to be a number of events that is to lead this character to get to this point. It's not like he just thought it would be like fun to do this one day. No, like, there is a buildup of things that pushes his character to this point. And we have Brian that is to, of course, had been in the Marines. And the thing that didn't quite make sense to me is we had Brian who goes into the Marines. And he, of course, was to go on and get himself also an education. And from what I remember, a lot of times, if you're a military person of sorts, you would go on and get, like, free education. But I guess all of a sudden, we have a character like Brian who somehow, like, the VA did not want to go on and put the bill forth on Brian's education, so instead they just take Brian's money, and now Brian is to realize, like, oh my god, like, I'm working 2 jobs, and I'm going to be homeless soon. I don't have money at all to do anything here, and now, like, all I can think about is these people, these VA people, were to have gone on and robbed me of this money that clearly they even state in the film somewhere that, yeah, there was a mistake being done here, but it doesn't seem that the VA wants to turn around and possibly correct it. Yeah. So Brian goes on into this bank, realizing that this is his only last resort moment thing to do. And Brian goes into this bank to then hold this bank up with a bomb of sorts, and is to just want the right amount of money from the VA be put into his account, because it's his money that the VA wrongfully took, and he just wants to stay there, or stay within this bank until this transaction happens. And so we have Brian that is to be put in this situation, and come to find out, Brian is to be, for the most part, a nice guy, a polite guy, and at some points he is to be paranoid in this situation because he's dealing with a mass amount of stress anyways. Supposedly, the girlfriend that he is to be with in this film is to say that I guess he was on a certain medication that she was questioning whether or not that he was in fact taking. And so, like, who knows what exactly that all means. But yeah, so we have Brian that is trying to look to people to try to get a sense of calm. And when Brian is to look to a number of people and have them do certain tasks, or need them for certain things, it doesn't really seem that we are quick on the gun with a lot of those things. Or that seems like a horrible turn of phrase. It doesn't feel like everyone is going to try and quickly troubleshoot. God. Horrible analogies. It seems that we've gotten to a point where people aren't willing to assist Brian in the quickest manner. And we just get a number of things that start to build and build with this character. And the more and more we realize that Brian may not really get helped here. And, like, the way that they write this also feels to me like the Ryan Reynolds movie Buried, where Ryan Reynolds' character through that movie is consistently calling all these people, and he's mentioning to them that he is in the Baklava Providence or something like that, and that he is stuck underground, and he's buried alive, and he needs their help, and they're putting him on hold, or they're thinking that he's joking, that he's lying to them, and he's like, I'm gonna die down here, like, help me. And they're just like, okay, so you're not joking. He's like, no, like, I'm going to die, like, help me. Like, trace this phone, do something. So, yeah, so, like, things start to escalate. We have this negotiator that at some point decides to show up in this story. At some point. No offense to the actual guy who was the negotiator in this situation, but I was like, man, like, are they not trying to, like, hold this guy Brian's hand through the process of anything? They're just like, oh yeah, like, at some point, like, we'll get to him. He just has his finger on the trigger, but of this bomb. But, like, yeah, we're gonna just see where he, like, decides to go with this, and, like, let's not have us take control of the situation. But, like, I don't know, I'm not a police officer, I'm not a negotiator of sorts, so how would I know how to do any of those jobs? But still, like, when seeing this on screen, it's just like, man, was there a massive delay. So with that said, let's just go on and get into spoilers about this one, because I've already talked for long enough about this one. I would say this movie, of course, is sad. It's a sad film. And also, like, I liked it. Weirdly enough. It's kind of hard to say that I liked this film, because there's also people that were on the other side of this scenario, and like, how could you say that you like this movie? Or some people may go on and say that it was too slow, or that this movie upset them because there is some racial or some race things going on in this film. And some people may have qualms with that. I'm just gonna say that I liked this movie. I'll go on and say that I feel that this movie was a solid, good film. There was some stuff that I didn't quite understand, like the beginning of this movie, that I'll go on and try to explain. As well as there just, like, a lot of, like, just slow times going on in this phone call kind of movie. And but yeah, like, there's some give and take about it. So with that said, let's just double five this bad boy up, because it's about that time. Just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. But yeah, a lot of people probably have different thoughts about this film and their own opinions, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, this was mine. Definitely go on and check out Breaking. Currently, right now, it's available in theaters. I went on and just watched it via some bootleg version on an app somewhere. So if you want to go and see the bootleg version of this movie, you can go onto a Google search and search the word C Movies app, letter C Movies app. You can probably go on and find out that there are several different Google Play Store versions of these apps that exist. Like Yes Movies, I think, has something in store in a Google Play Store. There is also Box UHD, Box UHD, which is kind of like the Fox HD Movies equivalent in a Google Play Store, unless that app no longer exists. And there's also to be 123 Movies. There's to be a logo that says 123 Movies, and it's like blue. I would go on and download that, and you should be able to hopefully go on and see a number of things for free. Not quite sure if it's going to be breaking yet, but kind of just check out those other apps, and by golly, be able to see this movie. It's the bootleg version, so it's not that good, but you could get the gist of the movie and just be like, okay, I want to spend the money to go into the theater and get a better version of this film. Some of the dialogue I couldn't quite hear every single bit of it, but I got the gist, sadly enough. So let's go into spoiler time. Let's go into spoilers about this one. So in the very beginning of this film, we have Brian that is walking, or no, wait, no, no, wait. The very beginning of this film is we have Brian who is getting his hands uncuffed, and I'm kind of like, okay, like that must mean that at some odd point, Brian doesn't go to jail by the end of this film. That's what I'd have to naturally assume is happening here. But instead, they kind of give us this false hope because Brian instead is to get arrested in the VA office, and I guess they let him off with a warning. They didn't press charges. They just wanted him off the place, and so they just kind of uncuffed him at the beginning of this film. So Brian is walking along to at some point call his daughter. And so Brian, of course, is to only have a certain number of minutes on his phone, and then he won't be able to turn around and use his phone because he no longer has any minutes because he no longer has any money. So Brian tries to call his daughter, and so his daughter is talking about wanting to buy a dog and trying to figure out what is the name for the dog. They're thinking about tying it into some Lord of the Rings character, which we find out by the end of the movie what that name will be. And Brian is consistently mentioning to his daughter, like, well, hey, how about it being Gollum? Like, that sounds like a funny name for a pet. And the girl's like, no. So Brian is to start to run out of minutes while talking to his daughter. And so at some point the phone call cuts off. Like, I know there's more conversation to be had within this phone call, but like that's kind of the gist of where I'm going to focus on there. So Brian is to walk around, and the next thing we end up seeing is Brian is to make it to this bank to withdraw supposedly like $25. Somehow this guy has this money, and or maybe he's going negative into his account, not quite sure. So Brian is to talk to this bank teller, Rosa Diaz, and they're kind of like chit-chatting about the day, about the weather, and like Rosa is to mention how like things are going well for her because she was to have something happen with them. I think her kid, and some tree burnt down and something like that. Something tied into that story. So something with that kind of thing going on there. So Brian then is to hand this woman over this note. She reads it, and it mentions like, hey, I have a bomb. And so Brian is consistently telling Rosa to call the police. So Estelle is to notice that Rosa is kind of looking at her, and Estelle is to start to calmly, collectively, like, start getting people out of the building, start to go on and, like, kind of tell people what's going on. And so it also seems that they don't have, like, a silent alarm in this bank, I guess. And so Brian is instead telling Rosa, like, well, hey, like, call out to like get an outside line and call for the police so they can get here so I can make them aware of my demands. So Rosa is to consistently try to use this phone to call for an outside line, and she's consistently failing at it to the point to where they finally do get a 911 dispatch person. Brian grabs the phone from Rosa and is to answer it himself. And so Brian is telling the dispatch that all he wants is for the VA to give him the money that he uh, had been like taken from him. And Brian is also like saying that if he doesn't go on and get this, that he is going to turn this bomb upon himself because he's not going to go on and hurt other people. He's just going to hurt himself in this bank. He's going to let everybody go free, and he is going to detonate this bomb on himself, supposedly. So we have Brian that is talking to this 911 operator, and we start to see Estelle, who is consistently using her phone for things, sending texts consistently to Rosa, trying to figure out what's going on. And so Brian is talking to the 911 operator, and the dispatch is consistently asking Brian questions about, like, well, hey, like, what is your skin tone? Like, what clothes are you wearing? And Brian is like, why are you asking me that? It seems unusual. And so all of a sudden Brian is realizing that there may be a sniper somewhere in one of these windows. And so Brian starts to run around in this bank and is to disconnect every single one of these cameras, go and shift the shades to every one of these windows, or these kind of these little curtains, adjusting them or whatever. And so Brian is also telling Rosa to do that as well, as now Brian is kind of huddled under this table, thinking that there is a sniper out there trying to shoot Brian. And so we have at some point where also Brian is to try to continue to call his daughter, and so it seems that every time that Brian tries to call, he gets no answer. So we have also that Brian is to ask that also another one of his demands is that he wants to like speak to his family because he just can't get a hold of them. So it seems that the dispatch like does none of that. And so at some point Brian does go on and call his ex-wife, Cassandra. Um or no. I'm saying ex-wife because that's what it seems like this like relationship feels like. But I'm just gonna say like Cassandra because I don't know if it's wife or ex-wife. So Brian goes on to call, and Cassandra answers the phone, And then this leads to Brian talking to his daughter. And so after that whole moment where Brian is to have to confess to Cassandra that he is robbing a bank, and that at some point, like, he's probably going to go to jail or die here, Cassandra is like, oh my god. And like, so she is starting to scramble, and we get to the point to where the police show up at this woman's house and are keeping her like held to her home so they can go on and like whenever they need to kind of use this woman as like a bargaining chip uh, for this whole robbery situation. But here's the thing: they seem to be like waiting as long as humanly possible to get a negotiator in here to talk to Brian, to the point where Estelle is calling the police herself to now be like, hey, like, when are you guys gonna get a negotiator in here? Like, it's been long enough now, and you guys have yet to provide us with one. So, to get this resolved. So, we now have the police side of things that we're gonna cover and get there. So, we have Eli Bernard, who is to go on here and show up and be their negotiator. And we have this other officer that is briefing Eli on the situation. And so she's basically telling him about all the bells and whistles that they have added into here, like this whole SWAT team. All these people, like fire trucks, are here, and a bunch of news people are here also. So, and come to find out, I guess there's a new captain also in the precinct, and Eli's like, wow, okay, all right. So we have Major Rickman that is kind of calling the shots here, for at certain points to tell Eli what to do, and Eli is to turn around and tell Major Rickman, like, hey, you don't interrupt me, like, you don't go on and tell me what to do, like, I'm the only negotiator here. So Eli makes his way to Major Rickman, and Eli is to ask Rickman, it's like, well, hey, like, so, like, have you gotten this guy talking? Like, where are we at progress-wise? And Rickman's like, oh, we haven't even talked to him. Like, we're just kind of waiting for you to kind of just put this guy, like, just to stew away until you got here. And so Eli's like, wow, well, like, I'm just gonna go into my own car with a number of men, and I'm just gonna do my own thing over here. I'll see you guys later. And so then Eli at some point finally goes on to call inside the bank to talk to Brian. But by that time, Brian, who could not go on and get a police officer or negotiator to talk to, because I guess maybe there is, to have this be a very small town where negotiators are limited, I don't know. And maybe they had to find some negotiator from out of town. I don't know how that works. I don't know if that was the situation. But maybe there was a whole reason why this guy took as long as he did to the, and also I don't know police protocols, and I don't have any kind of skin in that game as far as understanding like the way of which to divvy things out to whoever. So Brian is to just, I guess, Google like a news channel, find a 1-800 phone number, call them up, and all of a sudden Lisa Larson picks up the phone, and Brian is to tell Lisa his whole story about, hey, my name is Brian. I have a bomb. Like, I'm in a bank, robbing it right now. Well, not exactly robbing the bank because he's not taking any money from this bank. Instead, he just wants the proper VA money that he had the VA take from him. And so Lisa is to ask Brian, like, well, hey, well, did you go to the VA and what did they tell you? And so Brian replays to us through his brain, I guess, what had happened there. So Brian is talking to a VA representative, and so I don't know if this person had an actual name or not, but anyways, we had Brian that was talking to this woman, and Brian was to try to get this situation corrected, and this woman is to go on and say, like, well, like, the VA took money from you. And Brian is like, well, yeah, that's the whole reason why I'm here, because you guys incorrectly took money from me. Because supposedly, with how this situation unraveled, is they just, I guess, through an error, was to think that somehow Brian was not going to pay his complete uh, student loan bill, and so all of a sudden they just quickly deducted from his bank account this money, which wasn't actually the case. And so the VA, instead of correcting this mistake, they decided just like, well, hey, we're just going to keep this money, even though it doesn't make sense. Hence, when somebody would probably go on and sue for that kind of thing, um, in possibly a small claims court or something like that. But again, I don't know. Even at the end of the movie, we find out that the VA never paid back that money that they took from Brian. They say that by the end of this film. So, hence why you go on and make a movie about it, because that. Yeah. So, Brian is to go on and tell this VA representative that he is to have needed that money, or otherwise, like, he's not going to have a home. Like, he's going to lose his home, he's going to lose everything. He has 2 jobs. And this woman's just like, well, here's a pamphlet that says you're homeless now and what to do. And just wait in this line, and hopefully someone will help you. Hopefully you have all the time in the world to wait, because there is going to be a massive long line for this. And so Brian, at this point, is to get so upset that he freaks out in this VA and wants his money back, to the point of him getting arrested in this VA and then getting put off to the premises. So Brian now comes to this point in our story where Brian is going on and telling Lisa Larson what bomb he is using, what kind of bomb it is. It's a trigger bomb, and this and that, all the technical things about it. And Brian is going on and trying to tell Lisa everything. And so Lisa is using all of these moments to turn around and make a whole story out of it. And even after the fact, we have Lisa, who's going on to the news, telling her story. And I was like, wow, okay, like, you know what, I get it, like, some people's story needed to be told in that situation, but also it just feels like, hey, let's make money off of this guy's horrible situation. Um, but when turning around, you could also say, like, well, did a movie have to get made? I would say yes. Because this guy's story needed to be told. So, finally, after Brian has been talking to this news reporter, now that the police are to be aware that Brian is talking to this reporter, now Eli is now, instead of talking to Brian, still, he is instead going to this news reporter, threatening him to have Lisa stop calling him Brian, and for these guys to leave Brian alone. And so the reporter's like, "Hey, I'm reporting the news. Like, what do you have? What are you gonna have me do?" So Eli finally goes into his own vehicle and is to call Brian, as Lisa is to now be made aware that Eli is trying to call in, and Lisa's just telling Brian, "Hey, like, call me afterwards. Like, call me and tell me what's happening," and so on and so forth. So Brian is to talk to Eli, and so kind of find out these characters are similar in a lot of ways. And the more we find out about both these characters, I liked this interaction between them. The like both Brian and both Eli. I like the fact that it seemed that of course they had similar backgrounds, because of course they would, because like when you're talking to a negotiator, like the negotiator always has to come up with uh, a way to be similar to the person that he, of course, is going on and talking to. Like, find a way to, like, say, like, oh, yeah, I was involved in that same kind of thing. Man, that's got to be a pain, right? Yeah, I know, like, I understand what kind of world you're in, and so on and so forth. Kind of like when you would go on and work at a store and somebody would complain about, like, yeah, like, I really don't like this product. It's like, yeah, nobody buys it. Because I know, like, you should honestly buy this product because a lot of people buy that a lot more. It's the easiest thing to put together. Product sells itself then. To just be like, this is going to be the easiest grill. This is going to be the easiest item to put together. Definitely purchase this one. So, with that said, we come to find out that Brian and Eli have had military experience, and both of them were in the Marines. But Brian ends up calling Eli like the Hollywood Marine, where like he was shooting guns that had like bubblegum bullets in them, and all this kind of fun stuff, this fun bit of dialogue. And so Brian would consistently call Eli Hollywood, just because he's a different kind of Marine than Brian was. So we have Brian consistently thinking that he's going to get shot and get killed here because of either his skin tone or just the fact that he is holding this place up with a bomb. And Eli's like, well, hey, I'm going to make sure that I can do everything in my power to not make that event happen. Like Brian, what can I do for you? And so Brian is like, I just want $800 to be put back into my account from the VA that they took from me. and that's all I want. And Eli's asking Brian, it's like, really, that's it? Like, that's all that you want? Like, your life is more than $800. And Brian's like, no, like, that's it. Like, that small correction is all that I want. And Eli's like, what? Like, you should be asking for, like, this massive payday. Like, how can I get $1 million right here and now and whatever, to also have this helicopter or jet plane that's going to take me to some tropical island somewhere, and I'll be peacing out, or I'm going to be peacing out, and you're never going to see me again. Like, that's normally when you would go on and see a number of those kind of scenarios play out. But no, Brian just wants to rightfully, like, get the money that was taken from him unwrongfully, and that's it. The $800. So Eli's like, okay, like, but then here's the thing. Eli is to look at the records of, like, what the VA has on Brian, and isn't actually going to talk to a VA person. And so Eli is just trying to use something to again find more common ground. And so Eli has to realize that I guess Brian had got discharged because he had gotten shot in the line of duty. And so Eli is saying, like, oh my god, like, so you're like a war hero, and or you're like a guy who ended up getting shot and discharged. Like, yeah. So probably end up getting disability probably after the fact. Who knows how much? But yeah, still, like, once you get also, so yeah, if you went on and you got disability for the military, like, yeah, shouldn't they have gone on and, like, paid for his education? Again, weird, goofy way the system works. So, even the point where Lee says to talk to this VA person, and the VA person is to go on and say, yeah, like, this was wrong, but, like, the VA did it anyways. And Brian just kind of fell into that mistake, that error. So it could have happened to anybody, but this person went on and held up a bank afterwards. So we have Eli that is to go on and ask Brian if he needs anything. And Brian doesn't go on and ask any of the other people in the bank, hey, do you guys need a slice of pizza? Because we've been here in a while. Brian at some point asks, like, anybody if they need a bathroom break. And Estelle is to go on and go in there. And then Brian tells Rosa to go in there also. At some point, Rosa is to get so terrified that she can no longer move from where she is. And so much so that she ends up, like, peeing herself. Like, hey, like, people get freaking terrified. And, like, they don't know what to do. Like, the body locks up. And, like, it could happen to anybody. So, they end up having to, like toss, I think, Rosa, one of the SWAT guys tosses her over his shoulder, and they just haul out of there. Because what at some point happens is that after Estelle and Rosa go into the bathroom, Eli is to mention that he wants a thing of cigarettes, and so Eli is looking for a lighter for anybody to go on and get a lighter, and everybody's like, seriously, you're gonna go on and give him smokes right now? Like, that seems like a silly thing. He's already gonna blow up the place. Like, what is a lighter gonna do? So because nobody really wants to put forth any effort here. Uh, Something as simple as a lighter for this situation, like nobody really cares. Nobody's really listening. So Eli goes on to supposedly want to bring in this cigarette. And we have this sniper that is going on and hoping that he can spot Brian in through a certain crack in this this bank, which is to basically just be a window here, to really just see that this guy is kind of looking through and kind of seeing if he can go on and take this guy down to resolve this whole situation without the payday being the end result of it all. So we have this sniper that goes on and is to wait out because this guy keeps going back and forth, and it keeps to where the sniper doesn't have a clear shot because there's a Wells Fargo sign that is to be in the way. But we then have the sniper that supposedly does go on and shoot Brian, taking him down here. The rest of the SWAT rushes in to grab who else is all there and is to drag them out. We also had a moment where Estelle was wanting to transfer over the money to Brian to hopefully quickly resolve all this. And so Estelle was wanting to go on and transfer the bank's own money to this guy so this will finally get resolved. And Brian's like, no, this is not like your money. I like, no. Like, I want the VA's money. That's the proper thing to do. So Estelle is like, well, hey, I'm just gonna go on and I'm gonna just computer talk to the VA and get this whole squared away. And so we have our characters that are realizing that Estelle is trying to put something together here that may tip off Brian to say that she's not doing the right thing. And so Brian is getting a phone call from Eli as a way to kind of distract Brian. And so Eli is saying, like, hey, Brian, you're on the news. Like, they're telling your story and like distraction. And so Brian is to find out that this money is supposedly transferred over. And so Brian goes on to the bathroom to call his daughter and is to tell her the truth that he's not going to be able to get her this dog like he hoped for, as she, of course, wanted to name the dog Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, and we find that out by the end of the film. And so Brian is to read some passage from the Bible as he's praying with his daughter, and we have our character that gets out of the bathroom, and that, of course, is when, at some point, towards the end of this movie, he ends up getting shot and killed. And supposedly, like we would have to assess or assume that because death, the body never moves. They went on and take this like bomb disposal unit and go in there and grab the backpack and go on to dispose of the bomb and so on and so forth. Because this bomb has a hair trigger, and so if you go on and you shoot this guy, the bomb could still go off. So, with that said, yeah, that's how this movie just kind of plays out. And so heartbreaking tale, but at the end of the day, that's all that I wanted to say about Breaking. So yeah, kind of curious why they chose the title like Breaking. Was it like breaking news? Like, what was the whole idea behind that? Kind of curious. Were there other titles that they went with? Maybe they went with a cluster of other things. But yeah, so with that said, I'm going to go on and call this one a video. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. One thing that I forgot about that I want to correct here. There was also a moment where Brian was mentioned to Lisa, the reporter, that Brian had realized that his brother had put a price on Brian's head. That it seems that there had been a number of kidnapping attempts on Brian's life, and like that was also one like heartbreaking thing that we find out that Brian has been consistently in danger uh from, I'm assuming, his brother. And that also was to lead me to go on to realize, like, man, like this guy has probably like dealt with so many horrible events leading to this moment of just this one little mistake just pushing him over the edge. So, yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to cover for this one. I know it was only very like minute or whatever left of footage or whatever. I just wanted to kind of quickly mention that. So with that said, I'm just gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Let me know in the comments below if there's something else that I forgot about. I'm sure there probably is. But other than that, goodbye, everybody. Bye.